pre-game, I would lie down and I'd enter a meditative state, and just kind of all the shit that would usually come up, all the usual inertia, just kind of let it bypass the mind and don't get emotionally touched. So I was kind of energetically clean inside. And then one way I would know that it was working was, at the games, I would kind of not feel my usual self. I'd feel a bit lighter. And then obviously I'd play a bit better. And then the results ended up happening. I ended up getting 77 not out or something. And that was a good little milestone for me with the bat, because I always had the technique, but there was some ingredient missing. And that was the ingredient. It was the old patterns of the mind running, which I was able to move through.
Today's guest, Matthew Dempsey, had some significant health challenges growing up, and now he has a business creating custom designed programs to help people with their health and fitness. But also it's the work that he does for people mentally, which I found most fascinating. So if you're at that point where you are tolerating things about your physical health that you shouldn't be, that you need to make change, and maybe you need some mental strength around it, you're going to get a heap of lessons here on how you can change those patterns that you're running, introduce change. And there's an important one I want you to look out for, is how important it is to be open to new ways of thinking. I'm Ian Hawkins, and this is Sport is Life. The purpose of sport, as I see it, is to see your vision become a reality, find your voice, create strong connections, and learn to trust your body. Okay, Matt, how you going?
Going really well, Ian. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I think it was a boxing video I saw on your socials recently that really caught my attention. Was that you? You're the boxing training as well?
Yes, that's correct. The boys have really got into the combat side of it, so it's getting super exciting in there. There's a lot of camaraderie, and there's different dynamics forming. So really enjoying that. It's been a hell of a ride. More to come.
Yeah, I love that. And what I also love is that it wasn't brutality. It was like actual boxing, right? It's not like I've done boxing training where it's a lot of fitness stuff, and then there's other stuff where it's simulated. But this is it's as real as it can be in a controlled environment.
100%. I mean, you can go and train with Jenny down at the park where you move your arms up and down, or you can do real boxing, the real sweet science of it. It goes deep. There's so many levels to boxing. I think that's why I love it so much, because it's not just as simple as doing a bicep curl or a squat. You can go forever. It's 3D at its best.
Yeah, and my memory of it is that it requires far more endurance than people think. Like people might watch a boxing event and think, come on, have a crack. But have they ever tried there and they've tried to dance around a ring for 3 minutes with their hands up plus getting punched? It's a different level, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, 60 seconds into it and you're like, what is going on? It feels like eternity. But there's just so many things. It's almost like playing chess with your mind. You're trying to read an opponent's moves, just like on a chessboard, but you've got to calculate your own as well. Like you said, you're moving around, you're burning energy, you're slipping, you're rolling, you're throwing jabs, combinations, defending. So it's just so many dynamics all happening at one time, but it just looks like two bullheads a lot of the times. Just you think, boxing is just for dummies, but it's far from that.
Yeah. And I think people, it's like with anything, right? People just see snippets in the news, or they see certain moments and they look at it through that lens only instead of seeing the bigger picture. So given that you're doing it for health and fitness predominantly, what has it taught you when, like from your own perspective, actually engaging in that sort of fitness?
Well, I think initially, I got into it just through personal training. So I'd take my clients through box fit workouts, and I really enjoyed it because there was endless combinations you could do with your client. And it's a very intimate experience. You and the client working together, you have to get the timing and rhythm. You got to know how they move. And then it kind of evolved for me. I got more interested in what's the actual sweet art and science of boxing. And then when you get into the ring, you realize that it's all about you, and a lot of it is mind, because it's composure. When we were talking about how much it wears you out, it's actually a lot of that is just you're wearing your own energy out because you're so fearful. You're stuck in these fear mindsets. So it teaches you how to control that through breathing, through being centered, and then ultimately being able to back yourself, because there's no one else in the ring but you. It's just you. So you got to learn that battle every time you get in. Volume's just gone out.
That's because I muted myself while I was banging
There
around
it is,
here.
yeah.
I was saying it's the composure as well. Look, I hadn't thought about that from that perspective of the mental energy, the emotional energy, because you are thinking about, well, like you said, the word fear.
Yeah.
So what are some of the strategies that you help? Because I think people would take a lot from that sort of information in every area of their life. So you talked about you're focusing on the breath, but is there a certain mindset that you need to take in to make sure that you're actually not allowing the fear to take over and impact your performance?
Well, that's a good question, because a lot of it does come pre-fight. Like if you've been working yourself up all day about, the fact that you're going to step into the ring with someone that might be, better or the same talent as you, and you're nervous, that can really play a big part when you actually step in the ring. You can be fatigued before you even start. So that's a major part, is obviously, the things that we taught through sport is like self-belief, reinforcing good mindset, the thoughts that are going through your head. And then when you're in there, it does come a lot down to breathing. Like if you ever watch Mayweather fight, that dude is just so hyper focused. Like he's seeing every little move that opponent's doing. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why he's so damn good, is because his presence is just outstanding and it's impeccable. Like no one has been able to find that level of like cat-like reflexes. So the breathing is a big component. And then a lot of the lessons don't come until you get out of the ring, and then you reflect on what you did and you're like, wow, I got really tense there, or I reacted in the wrong way, or I was too focused on what I was doing and not paying attention to what my opponent was doing as well. And that's why I got hit by that right hand. Yeah. So that's kind of the dynamics of how you want to think about it before, during, and after. You step in the ring.
Yeah, it's really good. And that marries up with any sport coaching I've done. It's like
Exactly.
Training is for the repetition and to create the habits as much as possible in performance, in the game time or in the boxing ring. It's actually having a process to bring you back to just allowing yourself to play or box with as much freedom as possible. And then the really important thing is review. And what struck me is when you were talking was like, how many people aren't applying those same skills to the rest of their life? How many people aren't preparing, and they're not, and even if they are they reviewing? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how those sort of skills really cross over to other areas of life too.
Well, I suppose, a lot of the times we don't review because we don't want to, our own ego's on the line. Then it's on the cliff. If you do that, you got to almost sort of let go of your old self and admit that, you suck at this, or you suck at this type of defense, or, you're not as good as you actually thought you were when you see yourself back on the camera. So I think that's just having that humbleness to it. That's the beautiful thing about boxing or any sport, is there is like, you see a lot of the good players, although they might have a bit of bravado, usually at the end of a match or the end of a fight, there is that sort of, all the humble nature comes out. And that's just that recognition of, what you're doing is very difficult. And then you appreciate that not only in yourself, but in the other athlete as well. So, like anything, I think a good review process is just to have a system in place where, you spend 5 minutes maybe after the game, or, after you've been in the ring, and just running through your head what you did well, what you didn't do well. Don't get too emotionally wound up in it, because I've been down that path. I played cricket for 10 years, and that was one of my big downfalls during that phase of my life playing cricket, was I was so hard on myself. And I remember one day I even come home and I was sitting in the car and I had a little cry as like a 25-year-old man. And I thought to myself, well, this is me putting myself in this spot over and over again. I'm the one that's working myself up. No one else is. They're just reflecting back to me what I'm putting out. So ultimately, I have to have enough desire to find my way out of this mental trap that I keep putting myself in. So that is the biggest bit. It's having that desire to actually really want to be someone that you're currently not. It's that next sort of level or version of you.
So good. And it's that mental trap that you talk about. It's you're
Yeah.
creating this. For me, it was football. Like I played striker, so it was the missed chances, the goals that maybe I felt like could have cost us the win. It's the mistake that then led to a goal at the other end, and then going to sleep that night or the next night, just replaying it over and over again. And it was a real, like, I don't know if you found this too, but as you go through, you talked about in your bio the unwavering commitment to self-improvement. How often when you go through that self-improvement, you realize how many of these strategies and techniques you've learned in other areas of your life are applicable and actually, man, what if we actually applied these to just the day-to-day? Like how often do we get caught in those traps and circular thoughts of negativity about something that's happened?
Yeah, all the time. It's a constant battle against you against your own mind. But the beautiful thing is that I think the answer is actually pretty simple. We've always got to come back to the present now. And as corny as that sounds, that is the truth. And when you practice it, it's actually a fucking beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. And I've had a phase recently where I really found that part of myself again, where I'm sort of stepping out of my mind and just embracing what is. And I noticed a lot of physiological changes in my body just within a few days of doing that. And then, when you go back into your mind, it's like the old self reappears. So, the gateway's always open, which is pretty exciting. It's just, you wanting to be able to get yourself into that narrow crack, which is the present moment.
Love it. You mentioned actually it was before we hit record, but it's in your bio as well for those who have checked out the show notes, genetic scoliosis. Now I'm familiar with it being something that's like a teenage onset, which is pretty common, which is that curvature of the spine. But tell us a bit, is genetic scoliosis essentially the same, or like what is it? And then how did that impact you growing up, Matt?
Yeah, well, scoliosis is a broad term, and there's many different conditions that people can go through. I mean, I recently joined a scoliosis page where there's thousands of people that have scoliosis, and it's titled Scoliosis Warriors. So they're people that are committed to actually, not being a victim of their circumstances, going, well, what's the silver lining to this? How can this make me a better person? And I think that's ultimately what I took on. And this is, why I find myself, running my own business, being able to get up in the morning and teach people boxing or to do personal training and just to actually really give a fuck about what I do is because I've seen the good side to the scoliosis. And, I'm not going to say that mine was the worst condition. Some people have metal rods that run through their spine because their kyphotic and lordotic curves have gone so extreme that they need major surgery. I was lucky in that I just had what's called a leg length discrepancy. So my left leg's like 20 mils longer. So it's created a hip hike and then a bit of an anterior rotation. So as a kid, my whole childhood was like playing soccer, cricket, running around the bush, cycling to the next neighborhood, just real active stuff. But I had a lot of, as I got to that sort of adolescent age, a lot of my insecurities came about, my coordination wasn't as good as I wanted, or I couldn't run as effectively as I liked. So it put a lot of doubt in my mind about my potential, but it also created a seed of, okay, well, now I want to go and learn about physiology. I want to know about anatomy. I want to know about the gym. So that birthed that sort of new era, you could say, where I was diving into the gym and then I got into personal training, and it sort of all blossomed from there. And the rabbit hole that we were speaking about before we started was it just got deeper and deeper, and I was happy to go further and further down it to sort of uncover the truth of, well, what really does work for functionality and sports performance. What are the things that can actually help me to be better, whether I have a leg length discrepancy or not.
Oh, I love it. And as someone that loves to go down rabbit holes of alternative views for things, again, what we talked about before we hit record was just how much good information is down there. And just because it's not mainstream doesn't mean it's not good. And I think that's a trap people fall into. It's like, well,
Probably the opposite. Yeah, it means the opposite is good.
Generally, that's been my experience as well.
Yeah.
So when did that curiosity come about that you wanted to find out more? Did it, like you mentioned, through your teenage years, you're wanting to improve, and you didn't feel like you quite had that. But was there a sort of defining moment or an event or something that led you to go, actually, I actually need to do something about this now?
Well, I remember starting high school, and I feel like I was young for my age, whatever age that was. I can't remember now. Maybe it's 11 or 13. And I felt like everyone was a little bit more older than I was. And so I was a little bit thrown out from there, and socially a little bit awkward. So that was all sort of compiled into one thing. So I found the gym just for gym sport. And then that was my first sort of opportunity to go, well, this is my fucking thing. I'm going to give this a go. And that sort of gave me at that age, at that young, ripe age, a bit of self-identity, because I'm like, I really like this. I want to learn more. I could build my chest up. I look good, all that sort of stuff. And then that was kind of the first a big moment, you could say. And then on the flip side, when I got a bit older, it's like my early 20s, I was really heavy into the gym stuff, but I was doing the more mainstream approach. Like, I'm going to work chest for an hour, and then I'm going to work my lats. I want to look good. But because of the scoliosis, it actually worsened it. So I ended up developing like a really, kyphotic curve, and my lats, they anteriorly rotated my hips. So I ended up with all these postural dysfunctions. And then it affected my mind and how I felt, just day to day in terms of, the dopamine and serotonin was a bit out of balance. And then I was following the typical bodybuilding diet. So I was eating chicken and rice and, flooding my body with food 5-6 times a day. But I got sick as a dog, and I looked like crap. But at the time I was a personal trainer. So I'm like, well, there's got to be a better way than this. This is simply not working. And that's when I found the Czech Institute. Which stands for Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology, run by Paul Chek in California. So I went and did his courses, and I learned about, organics and functional training and corrective exercise and, the spirit and the soul and what it is and, how you can integrate all these things into your life. And that to me was just, it was like, finally, I've found something that's just so potent, and it's given me so many different tools to work with that I can apply, over many years.
Love it. And what I was just taking notes on just then was a different view on something that I'd already knew, which is sometimes that thing which we feel is our curse is actually our greatest gift. But what you're saying there is that those challenges leads us to find different solutions, and we bring our own unique flavor to that. And what you've done through your own journey is through your challenges unlock this whole new way of teaching fitness and health that people wouldn't have ever come up with if you hadn't have had that unique challenge. And I think if anyone listening, it's thinking about your own challenge, your own thing that maybe you see as a curse, and looking at it as an opportunity instead to have that same curiosity that Matt's describing, and that same ability to get out of the rabbit hole, find different solutions, and then craft a different way. So I love that, mate. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. And yeah, I mean, the challenges, that's the thing too. Like the challenge is great, but the reward is great too, because if you didn't have that, whatever the setback is in your mind that you think you have, if you didn't have that, but you don't deal with it, you don't face it, then you do stay in that pain. You do stay trapped at that level of frequency, you could say. But it's when you are willing to push through to go, no, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to give it my best. I'm going to find an alternative way. Then you get given all the gifts, so to speak, of taking on that hero's journey.
Yeah, and that's where things like stubbornness, which might have been given a bad name, is actually beneficial. It's like you're going to refuse to let this beat you. I mean, I see too many people who just tolerate so much, particularly physically, like you're talking about. They just tolerate it to the point of, okay, now my body's completely let me down. I guess I better pay some attention now. I better do something about it.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about preemptive or preventative strength and health that's made a huge difference to the people you help?
Like on a physical level, like just like a ground-based physical level?
On all levels.
Well, I mean, on the physical level, I think, posture is very critical for sports, because a lot of the times what we're doing in the gym is we're practicing all these isolation movements, but the body doesn't learn in terms of muscles. It learns in terms of patterns of movements. So if you're a bowler in cricket and you have like maybe a hip imbalance, then when you go to strike that left foot to plant and deliver that ball, your hips are going to be unstable. So you're not going to be able to get a consistent pattern in your rhythm. So learning to build structure around the hips and form stability and have those natural curvatures in the spine and have the shoulder girdles sit on top of that spine correctly is going to improve your performance. Doesn't matter what sport you're doing, you're going to get much more better results, because the body is in balance and the muscles are in the positions they need to be to perform their best. So that, just from the physical level, that is so critical.
Yeah, and if you look at the words that you just spoke, then it's the same sort of thing to the rest of life, right? Is you got to find that balance. You need to get
exactly.
things.
I was thinking that when I was saying it. It applies to the mind and stuff as well. So I mean, what would you say? Just because I know that when I was looking at your podcast last night, that it was titled the Grief Podcast. So what was your kind of, if you don't mind sharing your story and why you come up with that name, and sort of where you've come from now, from where you were, sort of thing? Because I'm actually curious myself to know a little bit more.
Nice little sell to the old podcast. So if anyone wants to go check that one out. So that came about from the death of my dad, 2005. And I appreciate you asking, mate, because generally I'm doing all the question asking on these pods, but it's good. And so that led me down the rabbit hole of like, well, I haven't done anything with my life. Like I'm kind of about to hit 40. You kind of feel like it's halfway. And it's like, what would people say about me if I died? And which is pretty morbid, but they were the thoughts I was having there sitting at his funeral. So I just started looking for answers and didn't ask very good questions at first, but I started to find some answers, and then I got better at the question asking. And when you ask better questions, you find better answers, you find better mentors. And I went down a path of something you described before, which is the unwavering pursuit of your own personal growth. And that's where I fell into. Interestingly, I faced grief again a number of times. I started realizing how much grief I had from my past that was unresolved. A young fella I was coaching when I was working at Fox Sports, he passed away as he crossed the finish line at the City to Surf we have here in Sydney, the 14K fun run. And that brought up a whole lot of guilt of, I'd pushed him too hard. That was my fault, all of those things. So I faced all of these different stuff, and I was finding I was helping people with that sort of work. And that's where I ended up in that space. The reason for this podcast now and in more into that sports space is through my own sports coaching, my son, going through the journey with him, getting things horribly wrong, even though I'd been coaching sports since I was a young kid, but learning about the psychology of it that I'd learned through my own personal growth and how you can apply it to sport. And then I'm just doing more and more in that space. I'm having parents reach out asking me to coach their young athletes, or just their young person in general who just happen to be into sport. And the evolution continues, right? So it's I think when you're on a path of self-improvement, it's being open to you're going to have different things come your way that is going to change your current perception of things, and just being open to taking opportunities and going down a different direction to perhaps what you've been thinking. And I've been guilty of hanging on to some of those old paths for too long, thinking, I don't know, I'll keep going, and not really reading the signs. Whereas this time I got out early when I could see that, I was getting a bit tired of it. And on
that note, that's like, I've gone through a similar thing. Just when you mentioned stubbornness, we were talking about that earlier, but it's almost got a flip side to it where, if you're too stubborn, then like you were saying, it's almost like you get caught in a time lapse where you can't actually move forward until you admit that your stubbornness is holding you back. And I've had that through business. Has been one of the biggest things, shifting points for me lately, is letting go of that and being willing to walk through a different door that you are like, you got this door that you want to walk through, and you keep charging towards, headbutting it, trying to grind your way through, but it ain't going to open. And so, it took me, you know, I think I couldn't believe what you're saying, because I'm like, I was just in the exact same situation where I was just, you know, just headbutting the same door. But, you know, our male brains, I know we can be stubborn, but sometimes you literally do. You've got to turn the other way and look for a different door to go through just to see what's going to happen.
100%. I had a client I just finished up with recently, and he reached out last year and he said, I've been thinking about this for 3 years. So he'd been stubbornly thinking,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to seem like I haven't got my shit together. And like I said
Yeah.
to him, mate, no one's got their shit together. Like, we're all just working it out the best we can. And now he's on a whole different trajectory of his career because he's prepared to walk through a different door. Now, he wanted to walk through a different door, but he didn't have the tools and the skills. So again, if you look at your journey, what I'm hearing is because of all the work you'd done previously, there was more of an openness to walk through that door. There was the more you face your own stuff, the more you're actually prepared to go down the rabbit hole, the more open you are to step into a new place, which can sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable as you're squeezing through that door. But when you come out the other side, you realize that, well, I'm sure you've had this with clients too. Why didn't I do this years ago?
Exactly. And you don't want to feel bad about the fact that you didn't, but you've also got to think on the same side, like you just said, 3 years that you can, you know, burn away, and the universe doesn't give a fuck if you're not willing to learn or to change your approach. It'll just keep giving you the same story. So, yeah, anyone listening, if you know you're prone to being stubborn in any way, that's something you should really meditate on and go, well, you know what, if I am stubborn, I'm gonna try something different and give it a different look, or, you know, a different method, or just putting down the brick wall is another way to look at it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the boxing side of things, have you actually done any boxing beyond the what you do there, the fitness side? Have you actually got in the ring in a proper fight?
Yes. Yeah, I certainly have. Yeah.
Tell me.
It was a really interesting story, actually. I had been sparring at this gym, and I knew that it was my time to step up and get in the ring. And I've been doing a lot of heavy bag work. So I was training under Rob Fogarty and Rich at the time, who were, you know, pretty well known within Newcastle. That's where I live.
Yep.
And I remember walking to his office one day and I said, oh, Rob, you know, I want to fight. Can you line me up with a fight? And he's a pretty hard ass, big sort of typical, you know, boxing promoter type man. You could imagine him as. And he says, oh, mate, I don't know, with the work you've been doing on the bag, that's not enough. And I said, no, I'm ready. I've been doing my pad work. I've been getting in the ring. So, a fight got teed up. But during that time, I actually, this is when Bitcoin was going off its head back, I think about 7 years ago. Me and my brother caught it really early. We were making a lot of money. So we were living it up. And I met this girl and fell in love. So all these things sort of come together in one moment where I said, I'm going to move to Melbourne, and I shot off to Melbourne. Then I had my fight in a couple of weeks. So on the day of my fight, I actually broke up with my girlfriend and then flew from Melbourne back to Newcastle to have my fight. And jumped in the ring. I had my whole family there. Everyone was there, all my friends holding beers, cheering, Dempsey, Dempsey, Dempsey. So I got in the ring and I was versing like a first grade, shorter, stockier. I'm quite tall. I'm like 6'3". He was a first grade soccer player, so very good footwork, very clean. And he'd been training hard, where my regime pre-ham wasn't ideal, because I was, going to Melbourne and I was traveling all over Australia, having a good time, thinking I was the king. So he'd been doing all the training. Anyway, I come out and I was super confident because he was short. I'm like, oh, this is going to be easy. He beat me in the first round. And then I remember sitting in the corner going, oh, shit, what's going on? This is not what I thought was going to happen. Anyway, I remember the trainer whispering in my ear saying, you're going to have to step it up here. So I come out and I hit him with this giant left hook, and his whole head went about 180 degrees. But he stood fast, and I took the second round. And then the last round, we were both like really fatigued, as we were talking about earlier. It takes the out of you. And he ended up just winning on points. So, that was my first fight. And I'm actually heading to Thailand in about 10 weeks. And me and one of my clients, we're going to have some fights over in a place called Phuket Shillong Fitness Street. It's like one of the most famous fitness communities in the world.
Yeah.
and it gets like, all the big name UFC fighters and stuff. So we're going to go over there and we're going to fight on the barbecue beatdown. And I'm going to do hopefully a boxing fight and a Muay Thai fight.
Oh, so good. I hope you're taking a camera crew of some sort, or at least your mate with his phone.
Camera crew, that's it. Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, really
so
looking forward to that.
So good. Now, you mentioned some of the sports you played. Did you have, like, when you were young, did you have like a sporting dream?
No, I wouldn't say that. I didn't ever see myself as like, with the scoliosis. Remember, I said I had that self-doubt in me as a young fella, but it was all about sport. And soccer and cricket were the two sports you did. I was sort of living in the country town, so yeah, I think it was just more that's what you did, so to speak, as opposed to I'm going to be a professional athlete one day. Yeah. Oh, you've gone out again, the mute.
Amateur. You mentioned before how many podcasts I've been recording. I still get this wrong. I need to get myself a team that takes care of all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so you didn't necessarily have a dream, but do you have a favorite childhood sporting memory that brings back a lot of good feelings and good thoughts?
Childhood. Well, I suppose like a lot of my wins come through like soccer. I was actually really good. I played keeper, I played striker, I played all over the park. But there was a couple of years where I just really excelled. I had a really good relationship with my friend Ethan at the time, and we were just we were like a little duo that were just really good at dominating the not so good teams and really taking and capitalising on those opportunities to score some goals. So, we didn't have to be honest, we didn't have the best coaching as kids. We could have had a lot better coaching, but that was the situation that I was born into. And I wouldn't say it was bad. We had some good and bad coaches. But yeah, a lot of fond memories from soccer, a lot of fond memories from cricket, a lot of hardships as well. And I think, looking back at it, that's a really good thing. I think, one thing that I've taken away and something that I would share with someone who maybe does lack confidence or has those feelings of self-doubt is I found a lot of power in actually transitioning from team sports into individual sports, because I grew up playing a lot of team sports and there's a lot to take from that for sure. But I think, for someone who maybe does have low confidence, self-doubt, getting at least try an individual sport, because when you step into the ring or you're playing tennis, I love playing tennis and golf. I love so many fucking sports, but the individual ones are the ones that I really resonate with. So, and I think that's beneficial because it's for obvious reasons. It all comes down to you, the individual. So if you play really well, then that lifts your self-esteem because you did the work to make that happen. Where sometimes in a team you can turn into the shadow, or you might decide that you're not going to give 100% today, and you let the team pick up the slack. And not that these are good ethics to stick by, but that's the point I'm trying to make is sometimes, things like martial arts can be just fucking fantastic for confidence building because it's really putting you in the heat of the moment. And some people have certain minds that are wide for individual sports, and some people have minds that are more wide for team sports. So you've got to find out what your mind suits best.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't mean that you still don't do the other one, but it's just know that it's a different sort of challenge. Like I've thrived in team environments, but I'm loving the challenge of golf at the moment because it really tests you physically, but of course mentally and very much emotionally, because it's like next level. Like you said, you're responsible. There's nowhere to hide. You can't rely on a teammate. You've got to be in it.
Well, golf's beautiful in the fact that continue. Yeah.
Oh, you keep going.
Yeah, golf's beautiful in the fact that it's a fraction of a second that you can't afford to lose concentration, because when you swing, every little moment, every little turn of that club head is critical in being able to hit a clean shot. So it really forces you to dial in over a long duration of time. Like you're out there sometimes for 3-4 hours, and you've got to have, the endurance to do it, but also that acute focus when it's time to hit the ball.
And I think that comes back to what we were talking about really early on in this chat, was that doing the training and then trusting the process in the moment. because the worst thing you can do in front of a golf ball is try and think of all the different movements of your swing
Exactly.
and try and concentrate on all the different things instead of
Yeah.
the word you used, which has been coming back to presence. And that's a lot of the training I've done from a personal growth perspective, is that presence, but then applying them to the golf course. And not always great results because I'm not doing as much of the physical repetition and practice, but definitely far exceeding what I would have been able to without that sort of training. What I was going to mention before around the team element, from my experience, it's often what you talked about when you said, we didn't always get the best coaching. And I'm pretty passionate about the wrong kind of coaching that gets delivered in a team environment, particularly in that community area where the focus is in the wrong area. So, for example, there's a lot of sideline talk when kids make mistakes, or young people or teenagers, even at a seniors level. No one's going out there intentionally to make mistake. It's bringing back to the process that they can control. Give them some education on what they can control. If they didn't put in effort, well, then that's something you can talk to them about. If they weren't listening to the coach's instructions, well, then again, both of those things they can control. But if you're just getting cut down by teammates, by parents, by coaches about skill mistakes, well, you're going to be forever feeling like a failure, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how important is that when you're doing the boxing coaching, the fitness coaching, the health coaching, to make sure that your students are coming back to that
Well,
key
I think, that's a cloud in the silver lining again, because of, and I've had some great coaches too, but what I'd say is because I've had, I've seen the bad sides of it, it's pushed me in the other direction. So, I've run a lot of boxing boot camps and, had 20, 30 people in the group and just had repeat after repeat after repeat. Everyone's thriving because it's such a positive community. And because I've seen the dark side of it and I've learned the methods, the right methods, of being able to create some really powerful tribes, have massive wins by setting objective goals, having systems in place, showing up as a professional. When you bring all those elements together and you have a very good intention, it does create magic. So that's really exciting to see. But one thing I did want to ask you too was, if you're working with a lot of youth, where are you finding that they get trapped on the emotional scale? Because one thing I wanted to chat to you about was I put 100 hours of study into levels of energy just around Christmas time. And you're probably familiar with that, where you've got basically a range of motions or frequencies from 0 to 1,000. And, grief, for example, I was looking at that because it's one that stuck in my mind after looking at your podcast. That sits at about a level energy of about 80. Now, that's pretty damn low. One pocket that I'm quite proud of myself that I've cleared recently is apathy. So I had low pockets of apathy, which is actually a 50 level emotion. So you can't actually get too much lower than that. After that, it's 30 is guilt and suicide and psychosis and humiliation. So you're really getting down right there. What are you finding for the athletes and young people that you work with? Where are they getting stuck at in terms of that energy scale, do you think?
Well, the answer to the first part of your question, which is where they're getting trapped, the biggest part they're getting trapped is with I'm showing them something and they go back into an environment with their parents and their parents aren't changing. So I actually am really strong on, I need to do at least one session with the parents to help them to see that, okay, here's what they've got going on. Here's how you can approach this a bit differently to really help them to come out of whatever the fog they're in or move to the next level.
Would you say that is criticism, that the parents are sort of getting stuck in criticism and complaint and blame? Is that, or it depends on the situation?
Yeah, absolutely. The children that I tend to attract have a really strong sense of fairness, and it's
interesting.
It's no coincidence that I'm the same, right? And I've got that same looking at things, and when I see things that are unfair, particularly on the sporting field, like I would go off on the football field when things weren't fair through my perception, right? Referee decision, opposition, all those different things. And it's how that shows up. And where do children feel like things aren't fair more than any other area. It's usually the contradictions they see from their parents. So it's not like their parents are doing anything really, really bad. It's
No.
more just that given what your child is struggling with, here's what you're doing that's actually exacerbating that. Here's what you can do to actually provide a safe environment for them to get better in that area. Because we're all doing the best we can. And that's one of the conversations that I have with we do a session together. It's like, none of this is your fault, but you can absolutely guarantee it is each of your responsibilities to change.
Yes.
And just being able to see that when they each are coming from a different perspective, and help them to see that neither of them are actually on the attack. They're wanting the best, but you both need to change some of your approaches if you want it to work. And usually, like I had one just recently where one session with the young fella, I ran him through a bit of a clearing process around a belief that he had. So that helped, but also just helping his dad to see that, look, and telling the young fella, look, I'm going to tell your dad this because, from what you've told, is that okay? Permission's important. And then saying to his dad, like, this is what he needs to help navigate this. And he actually is really trying, and he really has a strong intention to do it. If you come up from this approach, and then his dad, I did a post on that this week, his dad rang me really excited to tell me this huge breakthrough that the two of them have had because they were able to have a calm conversation. I'm getting goosebumps, right? But this is the stuff I love, is like the calm conversation they will both have to work through it, and to see that they will actually both really, really put in to make this work. And when you both realize that, you can live with the mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. I still do. You only have to ask my two, right? That I still get things wrong, but they know the background of it. They know the steps I'm taking to try and improve it, and they know that I'm patient with when they get it wrong as well.
And well intended, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think that's true. What you're saying is, like, a lot of the times the parent, 99% of the time, is well intended. They want to see the best for their child. They want to see their child thrive. But it's that sort of, it's almost that there's an energetic issue going on where the communication's not quite right. And then you're there as kind of like the mediator, I suppose, in a way, to sort of help clear the lines.
Yeah. So in answer to, absolutely. And in answer to your original question, most of them get trapped at unprocessed anger.
Yes. Yeah. So anger, I've got here at 160. Yeah. That's super common.
Yeah. And it's because their parents haven't processed it, and their parents, you only got to look back a few generations of the PTSD that our previous ancestors experienced through wars and depressions and all these different things. And they come back from these things with undiagnosed PTSD, with anger, with frustration. It gets passed on. Again, you've only got to go to any community sports field and see people acting out their unresolved anger. So that was me. A lot of it. I spent a long time working out more and more processes. And then one day, of all things, I'm hanging out washing, and it just came to me, like, here's a process where you can run through that anger in your mind, not act it out, but in your mind, allow yourself to feel how good that feels to release it. Give yourself permission to feel it. Even things like revenge, right, which would be way down that scale.
Yes.
Like, I use a 24 emotion scale rather than the 1,000 level frequency. It's the same thing, but it's
more applicable.
Absolutely. And revenge is pretty low on that as well. It's like 3 from the bottom, I think. And it's like giving people permission to allow themselves to feel it, not act it out, of course, but to feel it, to process the energy of it. And when you learn those strategies, then everyone's coming out the other side of that better every time.
100%. Yeah. That's wicked.
But also just thinking about what you do, but being able to channel that anger and frustration in a healthy way in any sort of sport, hugely beneficial. You imagine, like, in a boxing ring, if you can channel that, so you're not feeling the fear, but instead you're feeling confidence. So you're not burning all that energy on fear and uncertainty, but instead just a real strong knowing around what you're going to bring to the table here. It's just going to make a huge difference, whether it's a boxing ring, whether it's the meeting room at work, or in their own business.
Yeah. And is that your main strategy that you teach for your clients, that sort of a visual process to run it through the mind?
It's one of them. So
One of them, yeah.
So I'm big on visualization. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. Typical of an athlete, I started learning these techniques as I got older, like late 20s, early 30s. And the first thought is, man, how good could I have been if I'd known this when I was a youngster? And so the process of visualization, meditation to a certain degree, not everyone's ready for that, but everyone can work out visualization. Think about what you want to do, visualize it in as perfect a scenario as possible, and allow your subconscious brain to then act off that information and replicate it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
So if you look at what you do, how much of that time around the preparation work that you've talked about is spent in those sort of mental practices?
Exactly, because you're mapping it all out in your head before it happens in reality.
Yeah. So how would you, like, what's some tips you could give to the listeners around how they would actually set themselves up for that?
Well, I remember in previous boot camps, I would actually, now it sounds a little bit out there, but I would, once I had everyone signed up, I'd send every client a good intention for their, we'll run 6-week camps at the time. I'd set a good intention, look at the client, and wish them an awesome experience, to be able to achieve all the outcomes that I'd like to see them achieve, get the results they want, lose the weight, have a really good time, have the best start to the day, just having a really clear picture of what's the end goal in mind for this camp and what would that look like. So yeah, just obviously sitting down in the office and program design, and then doing all the practical work to make that actually happen, because that's the proof in the pudding when you're willing to physically move the body to do all the things that need to happen to have an awesome experience for your clients. So that's been a big one. And one thing that come to mind too was, in cricket, I was always a pretty fast bowler. I wasn't the most accurate, but I was pretty damn quick. I wasn't so good at batting, and it really used to drive me nuts. I never cracked 50 runs, and I think in my early 20s, I finally did. And the only reason I did is because I read a book by Dr. Joe Dispenza called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah.
And what I do is, like I was telling you before, like after the games, I get really wound up and emotional. And because I've been playing cricket since a very young kid, I think like the trauma patterns are really strong, so they're hard to break. But I had the desire and the will to do it. So pre-game, I would lie down and I'd enter a meditative state, and just kind of all the shit that would usually come up, all the usual inertia, just kind of let it bypass the mind and don't get emotionally touched. So I was kind of energetically clean inside. And then one way I would know that it was working was, at the games, I would kind of not feel my usual self. I'd feel a bit lighter. And then obviously I'd play a bit better. And then the results ended up happening. I ended up getting like, 77 not out or something. And that was a good little milestone for me with the bat, because I always had the technique, but there was some ingredient in missing. And that was the ingredient, was the old patterns of the mind running, which I was able to move through.
So good. It reminded me of when my young fella was his last year at cricket. So he must have been 11 or 12. And he had pretty small goals. He had to get to retirement, which I think was 40 runs he had to retire. And and he wanted to hit a 6. And he set that goal, and I think it was like one of the last games of the year, and he got to 38 or something, and he hit a 6 to hit 40, so he hit both of his goals together. But he was just stoked because he said, he said, well, let's write it down, and being able to pass on those same messages is so good. Cricket, a bit like golf, is like when you have an innings like that and everything starts coming off, there's just so much satisfaction of the physical aspect of that feeling in the middle of the bat.
So fun, yeah.
And I think when we talk about all that preparation, and you have the goal, the intention, you have that desire, it makes me think of that concept of getting in the zone. Now, I don't know if that's what you experienced when you got your 77, or is there another example that you've got where you hit that moment in a performance where everything just unfolded effortlessly, and it was just like Yeah, it's just like you were seeing moves ahead, and everything was just unfolding exactly as you thought it was going to.
Yeah, what I would say about that is, for me, it wasn't so much it come upon me, but I kind of forced myself into that present state awareness. Like I remember, being in front of the wicket and going, well, how can I stay present this whole time? And I'd keep some attention in the body. So I'd always maintain a little bit, I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but a little bit of
Yeah.
awareness inside the body. And I just that was my commitment going in, that I was going to do that. And that was able to clear my mind and allowed me to play really well. And then I had some great years after that because I developed that skill and knew how to replicate it.
Awesome. And I think about the best years of cricket for me would have been when I was younger and there was less head noise. But both of them had the similar thing, is I had limited stroke play. So I had a year when I was younger, which was really good. And then a year when I was probably early 20s, where I just worked out, if I just play the ball in just these 2 or 3, 4 areas, then it's going to be really hard to get me out, and I'm going to be able to score really easily because it's a shot I'm really comfortable with.
Yeah.
And again, it's that process element. Here's what I'm going to do. I've got a really clear and simple plan. I know I can carry it out because there are things, and there's going to be times where I don't get it right, but it just gave me such confidence to the point where I was telling people I hadn't scored 100 by that point. So it must have been early 20s. And I was telling people I'm going to score 100 this year because I just got that much confidence from
you were bragging about it.
Well, yeah, and I worked out the technique, and then I did that year because of,
and
that's what's possible when you get a simple process in place, you get that confidence in it, and you build it. So I love that. So I want to hear more about this. Explain more about this embodying that feeling in your body, because I think that's going to be a good one for people in sport for sure, but just in different moments where they might get a bit out of touch with their body, when they get too stuck in their head, too stuck in their emotions. So is there a way you can sort of articulate so that they've got a simple process for them to follow to play around with that concept?
Yeah, the first thing I'd say is, if you are someone that is prone to getting deep into your own mind, don't save it till you're at the game. I would preset yourself to get into a state where it's much easier to execute, because old patterns of behavior are so powerful and they're so ingrained that sometimes it's just a little bit too much to overcome. So like I said with the cricket, I would do it pre-game, is have a ritual. My ritual was simple. I just lay down on the ground, and I actually like to put a snooker ball under my back and maybe put it on around my thoracic area or lumbar, maybe where I've got a bit of muscle tension, because muscles actually store emotions. So if you have some points of tension in your body, whether it's in your neck, your legs, your back, place the snooker ball there, be in a relaxed state, and then draw your conscious awareness down to that body part. So what I mean by that is, don't go into your mind and think about it. What can you feel? Can you feel that ball against your muscle, releasing that knot? And if you can sit with that and then calm down your breath, then you're able to get into that state of mind that's going to sort of defrag all that shit that's going on in the head, and you're going to be able to come out of that in a very balanced state, because that's ultimately what you're after as an athlete, is to be in that even keel. And then from there, it's not necessarily magic, but you're in that state to be able to perform. And like you said, have your processes and go, if I commit to my processes, then I'm going to let the outcomes take care of themselves.
So good. Two thoughts that come to mind there is, for those who find the snooker ball quite confronting, if that's where they're up to in their physical, just use a tennis ball.
Yeah, just use it. You don't have to use the snooker ball. Yeah, the snooker ball is definitely brutal. Tennis ball is a great alternative. Yeah, especially if you're new to it. Yeah, that's a good add-on.
Yeah. But it is that state of getting yourself in calm, and I hadn't thought about it because I had to do that for my back when I did my back about 15 years ago now, and having the tennis ball in, like lying on it and relaxing, but the process that takes you in physically, that you have to relax when you're lying on it, and
Exactly.
being able to bring that forward into the performance. Man, that's cool. And I love playing around with those sorts of things. It's like,
Yeah,
well, there are mental things and there are physical things, but what if you could marry the two? And they're the cool
exactly.
things that I like playing
That's what I
around
was
with.
about to say. It's a double whammy because you're getting into that meditative state, but you're also, if you've got a sore back, then that's not ideal for sports performance. You're going to be in pain, you're going to be in a miserable mood. So if you can get rid of that as well, and then prime your body for performance as well as your mind, then you're killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
So good. So I'm just having to think about those transferable skills where we're just talking about matching different things up, and you said you're really strong on innovation, like talking
Yeah.
about fitness from a traditional perspective, or innovation, like when you go down those rabbit holes. What's one innovation that you've come up with that these are all yours that you're really proud of, that's had an impact for people?
Well, I think what we've just literally spoke about, I'm deep into myofascial release. So I wanted to learn about what the fascial system is. And I've also learned a lot about meditation through Eckhart Tolle and Dr. Joe Dispenza. So just what we literally talked about, it's like bringing those two concepts together and creating something that almost is like magic, because you don't want to just throw that word around. I reckon that's probably the closest thing that I've found to the magic ingredient to help you level up in a way that's not, because the typical self-development a lot of it's all about, NLP and using the mind, which is fine, but something where you don't have to, do all that sort of shit, and you can go, okay, this is just a practice that I can do, that if, as long as I'm committed, I'm going to get a fuckload out of this, a fuck ton. It's going to help me in big ways. I think that is huge. And the other thing I'd say is, because of, as I was mentioned with that scoliosis and it's thrown out my hip, then I've kind of had a very acute feeling to, what in the gym works versus what really doesn't. So I've come across, a lot of fundamental moves, like, using the machines, obviously not great because they're shutting off the core stabilizers and they're encouraging the use of the prime movers too much. And then, things like barbell deadlifts are maybe not that great for longer, leaner people, and using more natural alternatives, like maybe picking up a stone or using kettlebells and club bells versus really diving into the typical movements of back squats or, laying down and doing a chest press.
Love it. It made me think of so Brian Smith's the NRL coach, his young fellow Keegan. Are you familiar with his work?
Keegan? What's his
Keegan
last
Smith.
name?
Keegan Smith, Coach Keegan, I think he goes by. I'm not sure. I haven't seen his work for a while, but he talked about like the natural, not natural, the things that get done in a typical gym aren't in line with the natural biomechanical movement of the body. And so
100%. Yeah.
so he developed this whole strength building routine around how you actually do it in a way that's going to be best for your body and allows for
Sure.
the best results. And I remember trying to do some of the activities going, oh yeah, like I can't do any of this sort of strength. Like I remember one having to squat and then doing these curls behind you, and I couldn't even balance, let alone carry the weight or lift it. And like my shoulders are so bad, and
Just a
then it's
different
like,
game altogether, isn't it?
yeah, and it's that functional strength. Good point. He might be listening. He just came in the door. My young fella, he's been going to the gym solidly. He's built now. He's really strong, but he can't beat me in an arm wrestle yet. And that's that functional strength, right?
Yeah, well, exactly right. There's probably more rotation in that than you think. Like the obliques really probably take over more than you think. It's not just the biceps and the pecs driving the motion. Yeah.
Yeah,
So what's
absolutely.
your connection? Are you so you're a Parramatta supporter? Is that a Parramatta
That is,
symbol there? Or?
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
a long-suffering Para fan, like the rest of us. When this is being recorded, the day after, we got an absolute pumping from Canberra, not one of our better performances, but so no affiliation yet, but it's on the list, right?
Of course.
I did a short stint at the Bulldogs just before we hit pandemic and everything went to lockdown, doing some stuff there around wellbeing. But I watch coaching and I watch messaging and I look at the interaction and again, simplicity.
You can see some holes.
Well, just with every team, I could see like how to bring, if you talk about what I was talking about before about the team environment from a parent and child perspective, if you can just show people in a team a different perspective on how each of you are coming at it and help everyone to then come towards a common cause, common values, common thing that takes the emotion out, and it just takes performance to a whole other level. So again, maybe that's my preference around the team element. There's definitely stuff around individual stuff where I know that that's something I can do. So yes, watch this space for that one, because I would absolutely love that opportunity to get back into that space, but specifically with my team, because as great as it was working at the Bulldogs, there was part of me that was a little bit like dying on the inside.
That's awesome.
So, Matt, is there anything else you want to share? Anything else about the work that you do, where people can find you if they're curious about boxing, some alternative strength, particularly if they've got some maybe some functional challenges that are a bit out of the ordinary, and where they can hear more about the work you do?
Yeah, so I'm really good with chronic injuries. So if you've had anything that's been ongoing for long periods of time, maybe shoulder issues, back issues, hip issues, I'm really good at helping you through the process of moving past that. So yeah, you can reach me at thinkandgrowfit.net or on my social, Matt_Demps on Instagram. But I'm also, the other exciting venture that I've got on at the moment is, after COVID happened, I fell into a bit of depression pit. My business fell apart, lost, my whole client base, rada. And then I went over to Thailand, and I've spent probably the last 2 or 3 years there, and I've just fell in love with the fitness community there. As I was mentioning earlier, it's home to one of the largest MMA facilities in the world, Tiger Muay Thai. And it's internationally recognized. People from all around the world travel there. So I've actually put a retreat together there that's a 14-day Muay Thai intensive, where you can come, and we're going to do our first group retreat later this year, where it's 14 days of intense Muay Thai training, jumping into cold bars, doing saunas, hiking up mountains, just the full experience, where you can really not only challenge yourself physically, but it's a chance to rejuvenate too. So if you're a busy man who's, running businesses flat out, stressed out of your mind, this is a chance to, go and really enjoy yourself for 14 days and just immerse yourself in an amazing community. And yeah, the whole thing's planned out perfectly. There's itinerary for every single day. So I've sent you the link for that. So if anyone would like to check it out and jump on board for a first small group experience, then yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, awesome. We'll make sure you get that in the show notes. Is that for people who don't have to have any sort of experience in that space at all?
Well, so they offer Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, all forms of martial arts there, but they also have, CrossFit, bodybuilding. So it's not just martial arts. So you don't necessarily have to have a lot of experience. Ideally, you would be interested in learning the art of Muay Thai because that's where it originated, and it's, it's such a fascinating sport to get into, and it's really challenging but super rewarding. So yeah, you can be a complete beginner, an intermediate. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. You just have the willingness and the commitment to be able to jump on a plane and spend 14 days in paradise.
Love it. And I haven't done that sort of retreat, but I have done a 14-day retreat in Bali, and just being away from home in that sort of surround with really good people, like, you're going to come home a changed person. So
It's magical.
Yeah, highly recommend an experience like that. Yeah, absolutely. Very cool, Matt. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. And I thank you, and I really appreciate you asking me questions too. I do love a good chat. So it's a nice change to have someone actually bringing the questions back to me, mate. That's really cool.
Yeah, well, it opens up different laneways, doesn't it? And I'm genuinely curious. Yeah, we're into the same sort of stuff. So yeah, I enjoyed hearing some of your stories and your insights as well.
Yeah, cool, mate. Thanks again, Matt.
My pleasure, Ian.
What a great chat. My favorite part was the fact that Matthew actually took the time to ask me some questions. Really cool. So you got a bit of me in there as well. How important was that message of having a commitment to change? That's definitely something to add to your game plan. And the other one that resonated with me is treating life like a journey of discovery. Be open to new ways, be open to new ways of looking at life, at the world. That's where you're going to find some pretty incredible solutions like Matt described. You've taken the time to listen to this whole episode. Now it's time to take action. Commit to one thing you've learned today and make it happen. And to avoid any obstructions, join the Sport is Life movement by clicking on the link in the show notes.